This is House Planning Help episode 250. Hi there, I'm Ben Adam Smith, and this is the podcast for you if you're interested in self-build, because I'm exploring what houses we should be building in the 21st century and trying to break down the major roadblocks that may get in our way. Coming up today, 10 inspiring self-builds, as selected by me. More on that in a moment. We start today with a thank you, because we've reached 250 episodes. That's lots of interviews, few solo sessions thrown in there, and hopefully, lots of learning as well. So I want to thank you very much for checking out the podcast. We're very close to nearly 500,000 total downloads. So that is a lot of listens. Very grateful. I just love doing this as well. That's the other thing. 250 episodes. May we continue is all I ask. And hopefully it's going to get more exciting because of the next project we're going to tackle, which we talked about recently, which will be a small development. So a few of these podcasts will now be looking into how we might go about that. We need to find different ways, think how we're going to fund it and make it happen. Just very, very exciting. But I don't want to steal the thunder from today's episode, which is all about 10 inspiring self-builds. So I've visited lots of houses over the last nearly 7 years now. Quite a few that unfortunately didn't make it onto my list. But I'm going to run through some of my favourites in a little countdown. You know, this is the thing. I have to freeze it in time. This is where I am in time. I was just thinking through which of the projects that I feel are inspiring. So they might not necessarily be what you would select. It's maybe because I have an attachment to them as well. And I'm going to give you the various reasons as we go through these builds. So without further ado, my pick, let's begin at number 10. And in at number 10, this is like a DJ countdown, isn't it really? Chiswick Eco Lodge. I've always liked architect Richard Dujitsky's buildings. I don't know what it is, but obviously I think you just have a style that you like. And this one, very interesting because the neighbours were up in arms. It was just an old derelict garage here before, and I think there's no doubt about it. It has improved the area. What I love about it is it's a contemporary design that really feels like it's part of this community. Now that it's built, because I remember when we were making a video about this project, chatting to the neighbours and how they actually loved it. It's interesting, isn't it? I think there's always that pain when you're going through the process because it's hugely disruptive, having people building nearby. You're slightly nervous, aren't you? Because you don't know what the outcome's going to be. You don't control that land. However, lovely to get to the end and just think, wow, that is a great building. And then you go inside and it's striking interior design. And I remember chatting to the owner, Oliver Smallman. We'll obviously link all of these podcasts into the show notes today. And he was effectively building this so that he could rent it out. And he had his first tenant in there. That all went well. And gradually he's thinking, why am I not living in here? Why? You know, it's a fantastic house. And so he moved in the end and sold his old Victorian property, which is a minute's walk away. So it's a great story. Lots more you can dig into. That's going to be my entry at number 10. It was also a very tough site, as I remember. Very tight, very constricted, not a big space. So they've certainly maximised what you've got out of there. At number 9, Buckinghamshire Passive House. Now, as I mentioned, some of these projects I have quite a large involvement with. And this was lovely to be able to see it the entire way through. I think it's the first house that I've ever seen being built from start to finish, coming in regularly every couple of weeks. And it was a joy as well because I got to know Jay, the architect, and also she provided the HPH250 system, her company. But I got to understand more about how hard she's been trying to develop a sustainable system. And so I think that there were lots of joys from this. I think this was one of the first UK buildings to meet Passive House Plus standard. So there's that as well. It had the exceptional air tightness results of 0.07 air changes per hour at 50 pascals. And just a lot of common sense things going on here because it's Passive House Plus. It's not all singing and all dancing with 100 different renewables. It's just a decent PV array, cleverly used. So I think a lot of that energy went into producing hot water for the building, which is obviously one of the main requirements, and then exported after that. that to me just makes sense because you tick all these boxes, don't you? Materials, yeah, tick. Passive house, yeah. Generating. And so you've got to that passive house plus status. So that was just a joy to be involved in that project. Maybe slightly biased. A few of these might be as we go along. At number 8 is Hampshire Passive House. And this was architect Ruth Butler. It surprises me that so few architects actually build their own homes. Maybe it's a financial thing that they haven't been able to do it, but then I see some people who've been able to retrofit. So I do enjoy seeing what architects build when it's down to them. And what was very clear about this when I met Ruth is that she absolutely loved it. I think she would have gone out and done another one the next day, but just had such a nice time. And that's not saying that it was all plain sailing. For example, the site, I think a lot of people would have turned up, had a look at that, thought, no, on to the next one. Whereas she looked at those constraints and the design very much flowed out of that. I suppose good architecture is all about that, isn't it? So overlooked on numerous different sides. I think it was slightly contaminated because it was an old brownfield site. So she dealt with that as well. Great design to try and make it feel very private. It's contemporary, it's striking, it's very different to anything in the area. And I just thought she's done so well. All those neighbours who had concerns, she went round and she visited each one. And then again, at the end of the process, everyone goes, oh, wow, this is something special here. So I do enjoy architecture projects that transform areas. And I think this is another example of that. Was it CLT in construction? Yeah, so a great system to use. And you can find out more details. Again, we'll link this one into the show notes. Where are we up to? Number 7. And this is another architect-driven project. However, this one was built in his garden, and I'm not sure whether he rents this one out, but it's a lovely space. I think what impressed me most about this is a London project. And when you're in London, much like Chiswick Eco Lodge, you have a ton of constraints against you, so the building couldn't be too high. I think most of the time you're digging down, aren't you, to be able to get a little bit of space back, so you have to use concrete there. However, it's another CLT. Am I seeing a theme popping up here of all the projects that I like? It's clad in zinc and just looks stunning. It's also a tricky site in terms of the south-facing aspect is completely overshadowed by Victorian houses. So there's no sunlight at all. So a lot of it has to be from the west. And as you might know, that's quite dangerous to have big windows facing west. But what they decided in this case is that's the only way it's going to get to passive house. So we're just going to have to build this knowing that we'll need to provide shading to it. So it has blinds that cut out a lot of that solar gain when they get to the afternoon. But it's great because what you end up getting from that is you get all the passive house comfort for most of the day, and then blinds come down a little bit in the afternoon. But you're looking across these gardens, so these big windows are wonderful to just make it feel so much bigger than it is. And also, let's say it's around about 100 square meters. We'll put the exact size in the show notes. This is floor area. There are big spaces. So it's not saying, let's have 10 rooms. It's one big room upstairs, living, kitchen room, dining area, and then perhaps 2 rooms downstairs, a bedroom and maybe a study stroke bedroom and a bathroom. So really like the design of that. Thought it's very clever, modern, making the use out of the space, and yeah, just a great place if you're going to live in London. Number 6 then. This one sneaking in because strictly speaking, it's not a self-build, but it's Ashley Vale. And I've seen a lot of community-led housing projects, but I've picked this one out because as far as I'm aware, it's one of the earliest, most inspiring, probably to the others, to co-housing projects and so forth. And it just has this incredible story that they were fighting a major developer. You'd think they would have lost. Somehow they just had that drive to make it happen. They chatted to the landowner, explained what would happen if they bought the land, and have made this incredible, unique community. They've also been very open about the learnings because it was early 2000s. There were things they didn't do, some of the air tightness taping, and they just say, look, we would have done that today, but back then it perhaps wasn't on our radar. Jackson Moulding, I think off the back of this as well, he set up Ecomotive, which again was just passing on the message, inspiring more people. We must get him back onto the podcast. I think the last I heard, he was looking for land. I think he was tempted to do something else, maybe a self-build, so we'll see how he got on there. Let's move on to number 5, nearing the halfway stage now. And I've picked out The Cut. Now, this was a project from Charlie Luxton, and I just love the clients here on a tight budget, but just seem to do so well. This is Tara Murphy and Dimitri Duraz, and they kept the form of this simple, but again, just totally illustrated how you don't need to have a complex form. Just invest in making it look great, invest in those spaces. I remember they said, well, look, downstairs, money's tight. Why don't we polish that concrete slab? So that looks fantastic down there. You're cutting costs as well. So they just spent their money very wisely and have got a beautiful contemporary home for it. In fact, quite a few of these, I'm just going to look back over my choices. I've got quite a lot of contemporary projects here, haven't I? Yes. But I think that's going to change as we go further up the list. I'm quite pleased actually in selecting all these projects that naturally I seem to have selected a mix of different styles and so forth. It shows how much I would have grown. I bet on day one of this podcast I would never have done that. But yeah, the more projects you see, the more you just know when you like a project. At number 4, perhaps a more traditional design, but very exciting stuff happening under the hood. This is the autonomous house, and I feel blessed to have got to know Mike Coe and Lizzie Studley, who built this. They're actually on another self-build project now. At the time, they did not think at all they would move. We've had a few podcasts with them, so we'll link all those into the show notes so you can understand their story. But just focusing on this building, they went to extremes here. Mike is very passionate about climate change. Some of us are more awake to climate change than others, and it seems to be, as it should be, that more of us are waking up to this. So Mike is definitely down in the trenches. He thinks that we've got to be building more sensibly, we've got to be doing more, and I agree 100%. So this building, he went all out to what is the best thing that I can build? And perhaps controversially, it's a high mass building, so a lot of concrete in here. Going to link in a video as well that he made for us for our House Planning Help YouTube channel. And right at the beginning of that, yeah, a lot of these buildings are low energy buildings, but he shows us the PHPP sheet. They have a summary page, don't they? And on it, it's modelled at 4 kilowatt hours per metre square per year as the heat demand. Now that's basically a third, isn't it, of the 15 kilowatt hours that Passive House allows. So just incredible to show what he was trying to do. A lot of it obviously off grid, no mains water supply, no mains drainage. How did he solve that one? They had a plant room that was underneath the house, some large recycled orange juice tanks. So I don't know, I'm guessing here, maybe 10, 15 of those to store all of the water that comes off the roof, or all until it's full. And then they have to manage their water supply. It just puts you much more in touch with our needs as humans. So often this haze that I'm talking about, almost like climate change as well, we don't have any sense of, oh yeah, well I put my rubbish out and it goes, and I don't have to think about what happens to it. So they were trying to bring all the services back in-house. I think the only thing that they did have was a connection to mains electricity, and that was in case there was no sunshine for the solar PV. So really it was just a backup measure. But really interesting, really good video. I watched that again in preparation for this podcast and thought, Mike, well done, good job. I like that video, and all those podcasts as well will link in. So we're into the top 3 now. And this, very traditional indeed, but a building that I think helped me inspire my wife that we could build new. And her concerns were always, oh, I like old buildings. I don't want to build a new house, which is crazy really to go for old over new. Obviously, we do need to retrofit a lot of the old housing stock, but going to Fran Bradshaw's straw bale house on the Norfolk coast was just what I needed to say, look, this is a brand new building here, and yet it's beautiful. It's just got natural materials. You can see the joy that, again, this is an architect project. So at the end of her career, she's able to bring in all that knowledge. And I think even try new things. Maybe they hadn't done a lot of straw bale buildings at Anthorn Architects, but they did towards the end, and it inspired Fran into thinking, well, I want to do this, and I obviously want to try and get it to Passive House. It's a thatch roof, and it's just a lovely home. And I saw Fran the other day. She came to look at my windows because she is involved in another project near to this, and she just wanted to make it Passive House, so she's coming to inspect the windows here. But I think that is a great job. And if I had had more courage, maybe the house I'm standing in now would be a straw bale house along similar lines, but I wasn't sure in case anything went wrong during construction. I wanted something that could resell. So that, I think, was not even on her agenda whatsoever. So she just went for, this is what I want to build. It's also taking in the aesthetic of the local area. Norfolk have a lot of thatched cottages up there. So that's at 3. We're into the top 2. Out of all the projects that I've seen, so many. Who's left in the top 2? At number 2 is Treehouse. Ooh, do you remember Treehouse? This was actually on Grand Designs, and quite often I watch Grand Designs and think, yeah, that's a great story, but it's not relevant to us on the podcast. This one I watched and thought, that's interesting. And I'm not even sure they mentioned it much in the programme that it was a passive house, so I thought, oh, that's interesting too. And then discovered all the stories behind this. It's surprising sometimes how when something is condensed into a 45-minute TV show, maybe you can gloss over the really hard work that went into this. They bought a piece of land that didn't have planning permission on it, and this could have ended in tears. And also, the local planning department said it wouldn't get planning permission, so that's definitely a no-no. They took a massive risk. And John's story about how all of this came to be, because it's a wooded area, and the location is supreme. It is right in the middle of a town. So let's say a 2-minute walk to a coffee shop. I think I arrived early when I went to go and check out the house. And so I was in that coffee shop and then just thought, right, I can head out and walk that way now. So that is a great perk, because when you look out, all you see are the trees around you, and you think building normally is a challenge. Well, imagine when you've got all these trees and you're thinking, well, where am I going to fit this building? Trees move around. I imagine that's ongoing maintenance as well. And then the root structure, because of all these protected trees, it's not you just cut out the ones that you don't want. So they had to come up with this very complex piling solution, or maybe not so complex, but a lot of work went into it. Money was tight, so John and Noreen ended up doing a lot of the work themselves. And then you look at the finished building and you think, wow, timber-clad, striking in this location. I think out of a lot of projects that I've seen, this is one of the most environmentally friendly. Of course, different things have different challenges, don't they? So if it was on the ground, maybe it wouldn't have had the same challenges as being up in the air. But I certainly think they have trod lightly on this area and produced a stunning building. So we're going to link in a video that Home Building and Renovating made of the project, and also the podcast that I did with John. So that's Treehouse. Now, as we get to the number 1 spot, I think it's worth pointing out, stressing again, because there are lots of projects that I would like to have included in this list, but I haven't visited them. I hope I will keep on seeing houses, but until I've visited them, I don't think they have a place on this list. And this is, again, an architect project from Graham Bisley, but interestingly, in conjunction with his wife, Emily, who is an interior designer. And that's quite a powerful mix there. And I think it really helps the building come together that they talked about this for quite a long time before they even got the site. And then when they got the site, everything clicked into place. I love the open, I think they call it a loggia area, which deals perfectly with overheating, but also just creates this great way to take in the environment around them. As you might expect, a lot of beautiful interior design work going on. The timber theme seems to flow effortlessly from outside to inside. They made so many things themselves. In fact, this is a true self-build project. And again, as you would expect, I think they thoroughly enjoyed this. It was just a project of craft here. So I'm going to put the video in that we made of that, and also the podcast with Emily if you want to find out more about that. Did you think that would be at the top of the list? Well, I've enjoyed that. It's not often we do that. Hopefully It will be useful if you're checking out the podcast for the first time and you're thinking, where am I? Well, maybe work your way through some of these episodes, because I think you will learn a lot by checking out these case studies. The show notes for today you'll find at houseplanninghelp.com/250. 250, nice. We're here. So photos, videos, selection of links, and a quick summary of why I've picked these projects as my 10 most inspiring self-builds. Once again, houseplanninghelp.com/250. Let's finish on a hub update. And I want to say a big thank you to Chris Herring from Green Building Store for joining our latest conference call for the hub members. It's a really good one. I had a choice of different topics here because they give a few different presentations as a company, and I thought, wow, these are good. They're really teaching, and we must try and hone what they have done to add more value into our conference call. So this is a good one, taking us through windows and how we get more value out of our windows. And I think at some point we'll bring Chris back or one of the other members of the team to talk about the technical side. So maybe if you're not so clear on the G values and the U values and all the rest of it, solar gain, how you work all of that out, it gets quite technical. As I say, I was going through these presentations and thinking, this would be good, but it might go on for a couple of hours if I'm interjecting every 2 seconds to ask a question about it. So that's now in the Hub archive, that conference call. We've got some great ones lined up for the rest of the year. George from Archetype will be along soon. We've got Paul Tester. We've got Kate de Selencourt. We've got one on project management with Mike Jacob. And I'm sure I've missed out one. We're going to be at the AECB conference as well in a couple of weeks. So that for our hub members, along with the courses, the forum. We encourage you to set up a progress log, and it's great to see. I'm just going to do a quick shout out to David Reed, who is just about watertight. It's a very exciting stage on a project where you can feel, oh, we have an inside and an outside. This is definitely going to be a house one day. And he's just done so well. So yeah, come and join us in the hub. Check out what it's all about, houseplanninghelp.com/join. There we go. Once again, we're at the end of a podcast. Thank you so much for listening. The House Planning Help podcast is produced by Regen Media, content that matters.